Добрый вечер.
Good evening, dear friends.
Good evening, dear friends. It's my great pleasure and honor to introduce to all of you three outstanding speakers we have today at our discussion within the conference of Gaidar Forum. First of all, this is Professor Eric Cornuel, CEO of European Foundation for Management Development, one of the biggest and most advanced association of business schools that cares about the quality, new trends, etc. Plus to this, Eric is a fantastic professor, and I was lucky to follow his presentations several times. Our second speaker is Jean-Francois Manzoni, the leader of a great business school of IMD Lausanne that is considered to be either number one of the top business schools which are most advanced and strong as far as corporate programs are concerned. It's a fantastic business school with a fantastic dean and rector. And our next speaker is Andrew Jack, who is responsible at Financial Times for top international business education rankings. Plus to this, I have to disclose a small secret as far as Andrew Jack lived in Russia for several years, being correspondent of Financial Times. He speaks Russian, he reads Russian, and he understands the realities of our country very well. Just like Eric Cornuel, who is speaking pretty fluent Russian language, much better Russian than I am speaking French. Still, thank you very much, dear gentlemen and friends. Thank you very much for your participation in our today's discussion. We are discussing the leadership challenges in the increasingly complex global environment. Who are the new leaders? What is the new normality of leaders? Is it sufficient today to say leader is one who has many followers? Or the leader is a man with strong emotional intelligence? Or the leader is emotional intelligence plus cultural intelligence? Or the leader is a person who cares about the social responsibility and sustainability? What is the new normality? And before I shall give floor to Eric Cornuel, and then to Jean-Francois Manzoni, and then to Andrew Jack, I wanted to disclose you one small secret, how we came to the idea to discuss the leadership. First of all, it happened a year ago, or a year and a half ago, when I was present at a special party organized by Financial Times for the subscribers, where all of a sudden I found out that KPI in social responsibility is becoming more and more important in today's world. If the dean of business school, that was the first Russian business school signing prime principles in 2008, I was very happy about that. Then, after some time, when Jean-Francois Manzoni was making fantastic corporate program for the leadership of advisory board of Sberbank, or Sber, as we say today, and we were core organizers, I heard about stewardship, and again I heard about those high principles and approaches of social responsibility. And finally, just recently, in Global Focus, I read a great article by Eric Cornuel when he was speaking about the shareholders and stakeholders approach. And again, leadership plus to all the positions was connected with this stewardship to the people, with social responsibility, with prime principles, etc. And I consider we shall have a very interesting discussion today, and I shall make a full stop in my speech, just mentioning that we shall have one small vote. We shall make this vote now, and we shall get the results later. The vote or voting is a paradox one. The question is for those who are following us, who are watching at us, who are listening to us, does business need the new leaders? the answers yes, the answers no, the answer I do not know. And the result of voting of our audience we shall get at the end of our today's discussion. So it's my pleasure and honor to give floor to a great professor and leader of business education, to Eric Cornuel.
Thank you very much, Sergey. Can you hear me well?
Yes, very well, very well.
Perfectly. Здравствуйте.
Здравствуйте.
So, then let me start because I know the time is pretty limited. So I did on the different questions. So on the first question that was asked, there are, of course, as you said, very well-known skills a leader should possess. You're talking about creativity, intuition, agility, authenticity, emotional and cultural intelligence. A leader should build trust with stakeholders through accountability, humility, and also benevolence. Or if you take Peter Drucker, a leader is somebody others follow. I would suggest we add improvisation to the list. In the past, it was not viewed positively, but today, I think it's very much needed in our complex and unpredictable world. It's not a coincidence that active learning, as well as creativity, originality, initiative, make up the top 5 skills for 2025, according to the World Economic Forum. Finally, I believe the capacity to forgive, as well as acknowledge mistakes, is a crucial leadership skill, allowing people to transcend their routines and dare to experiment. So that was on the first question. On the second question, the world is fretting about the looming skills gap and its potential impact on economic output. We typically concentrate on the skills gap in lower and middle echelons of the workforce. But it's indeed a vital question. What are the skills leaders should be equipped with? And what is the right balance between social, emotional skills and hard skills? Mm-hmm. Well, as we all know, technology is everywhere. I mean, Industry 4.0, AI, cloud computing, the Internet of Things, 3D printing, social networking, ubiquitous connectivity, and big data are the most discussed topics in the digital world. Each of them has already transformed the way we communicate, interact, work, and live. Whether we look forward to it or not, the digital technology will disrupt value chains, talent development, structures, processes, and even revenue models. In short, the entire businesses. It's really critical that leaders have a good grasp of technology and data-driven revolution, which, in a sense, is an extension of the so-called intelligence revolution. However, as Julian Lambertine of CAR-RC said, there is going to be a point where all the technology has been built, and you no longer need gazillion software programmers and data scientists. Instead, you will need people who work with the technology and apply their human, personal, and leadership skills. Technology is just a tool that should make decisions more informed and more rounded, and our organizations more efficient and more forward-looking. But it's not an end in itself. Purpose, impact, trust, and societal advancement are key to the sustainability of our organizations. Now on the third question, you see I'm going faster. I can't agree with this statement at all, but let me elaborate on that. Far too long, the corporate world has focused on maximizing shareholder returns. I mean, while monetizing your business is of course important, a growing population values broader impact on a larger circle of stakeholders. Stakeholder capitalism was a key theme at the 2020 World Economic Forum, which took place just a few months after the Business Roundtable had provoked quite a buzz with its statement on the purpose of a corporation. Not everyone remembers, though, but the term stakeholder was prevalent already 60 years ago in the United States, yes. The job of management, proclaimed Frank Abrams, at the time chairman of Standard Oil, so 1951, is to maintain an equitable and working balance among the claims of the various directly interested groups, stockholders, employees, customers, and the public at large. So the emphasis on shareholder value also brings up another important question: whether leaders can apply their talents freely. Here, I would personally argue that we are facing a global situation of what I call constrained leadership. The shareholder value theory has established rules that propel leaders to favor short-term returns over long-term sustainability and societal impact. Such approaches have led us to a deep crisis of legitimacy, affecting all the elites, including politicians, and this could potentially drive us to greater social and societal dramas. Finally, on the last question, business schools are responsible for educating future leaders. Well, a segment of the population that holds, of course, overwhelming responsibility. Therefore, business schools have a strong challenge to take a clear stance on the issues of ethics, sustainability, and responsibility. Most now seek to raise their students' awareness of the importance of ethical behavior, corporate responsibility, and respect for sustainable development. Measuring the extent to which business schools act as good citizens and integrate these societal issues into their curricula and research is critical. This is precisely what we are trying to capture with the EFMD Business School Impact System. Driven by the rhetoric shift, the current generation of students is therefore looking to work in companies that combine profit with purpose. They want to feel proud of the organization, project, or initiative they contribute to. Higher education institutions need to actively instill a sustainable mindset in their students. It takes much more than just an elective course or even a course on CSR. Ethics, sustainability, and responsibility need to be fully ingrained in the school's culture, leadership, operations, programs, and, of course, research. From a holistic approach to pedagogy to immersive projects with local businesses and communities, there is ample space for schools and institutions to use their distinctiveness and make a positive impact on their environment. Well, faced with the intellectual vacuum and, at times, lack of innovative spirit offered by many politicians and companies, I believe that academia must take an even stronger stand. We should be catalysts, whistleblowers, and change agents to help reconcile management, technology, development, and societies. Academia in general, and business schools in particular, have the potential, in my opinion, to be agents of change. But in order to fulfill this potential, we have to ask ourselves what kind of actions or initiatives are necessary to hasten our reorientation towards a more socially engaged and heuristic approach. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very, very much, Eric. Fantastic presentation where step by step you are showing the new image of leaders of the future. And now I want to give floor to Jean-Francois Manzoni so we shall get even more holistic approach and vision. If you please, Jean-Francois.
so I don't know if it will be more holistic. Rather than answer the 4 questions as such, I've interpreted them as being a twofold question, which is, how is the world evolving and how is this influencing what leaders need to be able to do? And I guess if they have to be able to do it, then they have to be able to learn it, and maybe business schools have a role to play. Sergey started with, do we need new leaders? I don't know if we need new leaders, but we certainly need leaders who know new things. That, I think, is clear. So I want to say leaders of the future are going to need 4 major areas of expertise. One is strategic savvy, strategic capability to understand how a more volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, this VUCA world, how this influences the sources of value creation and value capture. Where should they play and how will they win? So strategic savvy. 2, organizational savvy. How do I get a few hundreds or a few thousands or a few tens of thousands of people to do what we expect them to do? How do we organize efforts and how do we guide the efforts and the attention of all of these people to behave in a way which is supportive of the strategy? So organizational savvy. 3, self-management. There are many dimensions to managing yourself. One of them, of course, is energy. Another one is ethical compass, your ethical guideposts. So strategic savvy, organizational savvy, managing yourself in a world that is very stressful and challenging. And 4th, becoming a lifelong leader. Because in a world that changes very fast, the recipes or the ideas that were successful yesterday may not be enough in the world that you live in today or you will live in tomorrow. So one of the questions was, is it soft skills or is it digital? And obviously the answer has got to be, it is both. You need to understand the digital revolution or the 4th industrial revolution to understand the implications on your industry and on your company, and that's part of strategic savvy. But you also need to be able to influence the organization and to manage yourself. And that is part of what is usually called soft skills. So I think it is not one or the other, it has to be both. Now, within self-management, I mentioned ethical compass. So more specifically, and Eric, of course, addressed this already, you're looking at the leader's ability to function ethically, which means not only in a compliant sort of way, not only in terms of the laws, but more generally, in terms of what is the right thing to do. And of course, the right thing to do depends on how much weight, how much emphasis we give to environmental issues and to social issues. Now, there are still today some trade-offs sometimes between what is good for the organization financially in the short term and what would be good for the environment and for society. But we at IMD believe that, first of all, there are less of these trade-offs than there used to be because organizations are learning how to be innovative and how to be intelligent in order to do well financially by doing good for the world. So there is this notion of doing well by doing good. You have to be smart, you have to be innovative. Sometimes you have to partner with other organizations, sometimes to partner with NGOs. But it is possible, and a larger and ever increasing number of organizations are showing us that it is possible. B, we at AMD also think that increasingly society is forcing and will force organizations to internalize the cost of their actions. Increasingly, regulators will make organizations pay for environmental or social damage. Increasingly, customers will make organizations pay. And increasingly, consumers and employees will choose to join organizations that have a more positive impact on society and will increasingly demand higher salary and higher compensation from organizations that do not. So yes, in the short run, there are still occasional trade-offs. We need to encourage leaders, and we try to develop leaders who will make the right decisions, not only in the short run, but also in the long run. Because if nothing else, we are all jointly responsible for the world that we are creating. It's not like, there are some people who decide and others who don't. All the leaders have some influence on the world that we are co-creating. And so we expect leaders to make the right decisions in order to create a world that is more inclusive and more sustainable. And of course, also higher performance. How do we train people to do this? Well, we have to help them understand why they have to behave this way. And then we have to help them understand how they can decide on a basis that will lead to more ethical and sustainable decisions. Why? Well, there's a positive side because the earth cannot continue to function. We will not, or we will, but our kids will not have a livable planet if we don't make different decisions. And by the way, increasingly the world will hold you responsible. One of my slides, when I opened this module with our MBA students, is I show them one of our MBA graduates with handcuffs. He's in jail today because he kept corrupting, and one day he got caught. And so I said, one of the reasons you're learning this is so that you don't go to jail. Then we have to explain to them how. And again, that becomes a training in how do you resist biases, how do you overcome biases, including unconscious biases, and how do you make more intelligent decisions. Voilà, so that's not an answer to the 4 questions, but hopefully it helps a bit. Sergey, back to you.
Thank you very much, Jean-Francois. Though I'm a professor myself, I just have to exclaim, you're a fantastic presenter. I was listening to you and I forgotten about the time. Thank you that you remember about the time. Thank you. And now it's my pleasure to give floor to our third speaker, a fantastic expert and very interesting man too. I want to give floor to Andrew Jack from Financial Times. If you please, Andrew.
Thanks very much, Sergey, and great to hear from Eric and Jean-Francois as well. And I agree, I think, with almost everything that they've said. I'm not going to give a comprehensive answer, but I'll touch on the 4 questions that we were set. As you'll know, the Financial Times covers business education as well as many other aspects of business and society. We do publish, of course, rankings around business schools, and I'm not going to reveal any scoops to you today on those rankings, although you'll see in 3 weeks' time the latest assessment of business schools and the quality of their MBAs around the world. But I will give you a couple of sneak previews of 2 other issues related to our discussion today that I've written for that magazine. And those 2 subjects are 1, sustainability, and 2, empathy. So going to that first question about rethinking leadership, As well as writing a lot about education, I also continue to follow and write about health. So these two areas of human or social capital, if you like. And to me, they're fundamentally interlinked. There's a lot of work, increasing research around mental health in the workplace, as we know, and of course, coronavirus and the drive towards working remote, as well as coping with the economic fallout of coronavirus, brings mental health to the fore. But even short of any clinical mental health conditions, the issue of well-being at work, of employee motivation, is incredibly and increasingly important. And to me, leadership within businesses and organizations and the role of business schools in trying to teach skills related to that, what we might call emotional intelligence or empathy, are fundamental. Because if business schools can't prepare and equip the next generation of managers and leaders in business with the skills to identify and support and empower workers, then not only will society feel the consequences, but individual businesses will feel a slowdown in their productivity. So I think that's a fundamental area. We talk in the second theme around soft versus hard skills. And I agree we need, of course, both. But I would argue that if anything, leaders need more soft skills, perhaps even than hard skills. Hard skills can be acquired. Hard skills can to some degree be delegated as long as senior leadership has sufficient judgment and understanding to go to seek that advice. But if leadership isn't fundamentally empathetic, used to leading from below, from motivating others to, precisely as Eric said, from Drucker, to actually get others to want to follow, then it will fail. The third area is talking about sustainability and societal impact. And I think it's true that there are risks of trade-offs, particularly post-coronavirus. Whenever there's a crisis, there's a temptation to refocus on recovery for profit maximization at the expense of wider factors. But I think all of us are increasingly aware of issues not only around mental well-being, as I've discussed, but also around climate change, which are fundamentally, existentially changing our society. And we do need to respond to them much more effectively. Is there a trade-off, though? Do we risk falling backwards after progress in recent years? I think there's a very big danger of that. I think the reality is that we can't do this simply from the bottom up, spontaneously. We need clear national and international political leadership. We need tougher regulation, whether it's around the operation of big tech or around, for example, carbon pricing and other ways to incentivize, structure and require improvements to reduce the world's carbon footprint. And I'm not sure in this era of deglobalization and self-interest, we're quite there. A second challenge around it, though, I think, is that while there's a lot of talk about what might be called ESG and the Sustainable Development Goals at the moment, there's a huge amount of marketing and greenwash around it as well. And even organizations that are significantly or primarily claiming to be investing for good or acting in a way for society's wider benefit are often, on the other hand, doing all sorts of activities and practices that are moving in the other direction. So I think there's, alongside regulation and political leadership internationally, there's a huge need for more consistent, comprehensive benchmarks and metrics to understand the true social costs and benefits of organizations. And that brings me to my final point, which is back to the role of the business school and, for example, of the UN Prime, the Principles for Responsible Management Education, because if companies and the private sector are still in the very early stages of trying to define metrics around sustainability and ESG more generally, then that's even more a challenge and more early stage for business schools. I think Prime and a number of other initiatives in business education are making some good efforts to push in the right direction. But I'm sorry to say, I think still we have a huge amount of progress yet required. And while many students, faculty, employers at the high level talk about the need for embedding these skills and preparing for a future generation and society focused on people and purpose and planet alongside profit, I think business schools, in combination with students, with academics, more widely with employers of all sorts, need to fundamentally rethink and embed those factors in their teaching, in their research, and also in the operations of their own business schools. And you'll see in our forthcoming publication, I talk about that, the role of moving towards carbon neutrality, of setting targets for measuring and reporting around schools' operations themselves, to track diversity, and to focus on the wider range of relevant teaching that has, and teaching and research that has societal impact. So I've tried to be involved in engaging with that debate, in trying to encourage the sector to set consistent standards for benchmarking, for comparison, and above all to incentivize greater progress for society's benefits and individuals and corporate benefits around the world. And that's a challenge that we certainly intend to continue to play a leading role in, with cooperation from business schools around the world. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you. So now we get around 360 degrees perception of the new vision of leadership. And with your permission, I want to use quotation of Jean-Francois Manzoni. He mentioned, I have doubt whether we need new leaders, but I have no doubts that we need the leaders. Before I shall ask several small questions to you, gentlemen, I wanted to provide you with the results of voting. The question was whether we need the new leaders. And those who are following our discussion voted in this way. 73% voted yes, we need the new leaders. 7% voted, I do not know. And 20% voted, we do not need new leaders. This is just to create awareness about how our potential customers and those people who are following our discussion feels. Now, my first small question. Thanks to Western taxpayers, very many years ago, in the year of 1993, I spent 2 months at Harvard Business School in the retraining on strategy and organizational behavior. And there, we especially studied and read the book of the first Associate Dean of Harvard of this time, Professor Thomas Piper. The title of the book was Whether the Ethics Can Be Taught. And I want to ask this question to you. If we want to bring up the new ability of leaderships to look for the interests of the stakeholders, is it possible for us really to make a high-quality education or training that will bring up, pull up the ethics of those people who are coming to business schools and corporate universities? Any of you? Yes, please, Eric.
We need a victim, but otherwise I'm very happy to leave the floor to my colleagues. I have an anecdote about Harvard Business School. I think when the first shareholder in ethics at Harvard Business School retired, he made a big speech saying you have to go for ethics because ethics pays. Well, I don't think he has really understood the meaning of ethics, so I'm not 100% certain that it's there that we have to get lessons from. But, I mean, that's just in passing, just a digression. When I see what some European schools are doing, I'm very proud of that. Mm-hmm. I think it's a continuum, but business schools are coming later in the educational cycle. And for me, primary education, and in a certain extent secondary, but primary education is such an important thing. I mean, at the age of 5 or 6, this is the moment where you should be taught a certain number of things. And when you see that in many countries, those people, school teachers are paid a misery, it's a catastrophe for the future of the country and the future of responsibility. So here, it's a very big call for the primary education. That's all what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Yes,
Yes, please.
Sorry, yes, I apologize because I have to leave in just a couple of minutes. But yes, I mean, I think we can't expect business schools alone to be teaching somebody who, let's say, doesn't have ethics to become ethical in 1 year or 2 years, of course. That's not realistic. But I think there's a wider role for society, and business schools can play a role in that, both in terms of their selection, frankly, of students in the first place, and in terms of setting frameworks for accountability and of thinking about toolkits, about ways in which individuals within organizations can practically handle different scenarios where they might be put under pressure. And that's partly engaging with research, with case studies, with hearing from people in different situations. So I think, you can't just have a course in ethics and expect somebody to come out transformed, but you should engage with it, absolutely, and you should be able to find some lessons and guide rails to help.
Let me briefly build on what Andrew said. We don't transform from one day to the other because that's not the way the brain works. Neurons that fire together wire together. So if you want neural connections in the brain to become solid, you have to make the neurons fire together often and over a sufficient period of time. Also, it is correct to say that there is a certain ethical education that should have occurred prior to entering business school. And it's difficult to override 25 or 30 years, or in some cases 32 or 33 years of behavior. But number one, as Andrew said, we can select students. Number two, we can also observe their behavior and decide to graduate them or not. Right now in the US, a number of schools have temporarily suspended students who lied blatantly about where they went during COVID confinement. I would not have suspended them temporarily. I would have sacked them from the program. If you lie to me blatantly during a program, you're going to lie blatantly again outside of our program. So A, we can choose them. B, we can observe their behavior and encourage them to behave differently or eliminate them. Three, in addition to the research and the courses that Andrew mentioned, I also want to mention another point. We need to help people understand how their initial makeup influences the way they think of ethical issues. Quick example, my last two sons, in Myers-Briggs, which is a form of psychometric personality classification, one of them is a strong, rational thinker. The other one is very connected to relationships. The one who's very rational doesn't appreciate enough the importance of relationship in terms of the impact of his behavior. But the one who is very relationship driven can be made to do things he shouldn't be doing because people will create pressure on him by saying, oh, come on, be nice, help us. So my job is to help both of them understand how their genetic makeup and their initial education influences how they're going to be tempted to see ethical issues. So we need to educate in terms of frameworks and so on. We also need to increase people's self-awareness in terms of how are you cabled initially, how has nature cabled you, and how is this initial cabling in need of further education to help you become a more mature and responsible deciding unit.
Thank you very, very much, Jean-Francois. You see, in fact, you immediately brought me to one more question, and from my point of view, pretty important question, though maybe it's not exactly and immediately interconnected with the retraining of adults. You see, our society programs us for values, as Gerd Hofstede used to write when he was creating the concept of cross-cultural management. And we are programmed at 3 stages of our social growth: at our family, in the school, and then at our work. How do you think, when have we started to train or to program the future society for values? At the school level, at the university level, is it possible to change their perception of the values when they're already adult? Recently, I mean the Russian Association of Business Education, special work with the secondary schools of Russia and the teachers at the secondary school at the higher classes. We tried to bring the ideas of social responsibility on the one hand and entrepreneurship on the other to their perception of what is good in this life. How do you think, philosophically, at what level, at what age, we have to start this work with our societies in different countries of the planet?
I'll just say one thing briefly, because unfortunately I must leave, but
yes.
to me it begins before birth, which is to say it's a genetic issue partly, and it depends very much on the attitude of the family in which a child is raised. So this whole process begins from the community and the family and friends in the first instance, in preschool, but then I think at every stage of education, through infancy and primary and secondary education, through universities and beyond. This should be part of a value system. It should be taught. But I do think, yes, it could change over time as well. I think even in later life, people's attitudes can change, partly through their own reflections and life experiences, and partly where necessary, as Jean-Francois was saying, perhaps when there's external triggers or forms of discipline. Dismissal, fines, prosecution. And I think the other secret is to engage practically. So, for example, sustainability, I think, is a clear issue of growing importance for individuals and of the next generation. So let's start with practical, tangible attitudes and explore how those can be ways to understand and engage with what could otherwise be slightly more abstract concepts of ethics. With that, I'm afraid I must leave you, but I look forward to continuing our dialogue.
Thank you. We still have 2 minutes. Maybe Eric, thank you very much. Thank you, Andrei. We have 2 minutes. Maybe Eric would tell us a little bit about his vision. How can we change the mentality of the people a little bit quicker? Because it's a long-term process.
I fully agree with what was said by Andrew, but also by what was said by Jean-Francois just before about the cabling and all these elements that are, let's say, very heavy. I don't think you can change stuff very, very quickly. But what matters is that education is a continuum. I mean, you have, first of all, the internal element, intrinsically you, and you go through a process of education, a continuum from very early in age to, let's say, lifelong learning. But at the same time, you may consider that there are some environmental elements that can potentially affect the way you're going to behave in terms of ethics or responsibility. I mean, not only your relations, if you want, but in a certain extent, the direction, the societal direction. And when we see, I mean, some movements that have taken place in the past years regarding ethics, regarding taking care of the planet, etc., I believe this kind of external sources can also influence positively. So it's in a way an emergent strategy. It's a convergence of flows, internal and external ones.
Thank you very, very much. It seems to me that we are next to be out of time. Gentlemen, thank you very, very much. And please take care. Please try to be healthy. And I do hope to meet you for the new discussion next year at Gaidar Forum Live in Moscow, and to show you a little bit of the new things of our capital. Thank you very much and see you soon. Take care, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Salut Jean-François.